True crime stories that stay in the family are some of the most disturbing. It's truly eerie to see how far these scary people will go to help their siblings, even if it means taking the lives of loved ones or strangers. Number 5. Stepbrothers Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman grew up together in the town of Oskaloosa, Iowa. McMahon was 4 years older than Kaufman, but after McMahon lost his job at a local plant, he started hanging out with Kaufman again. The two had been in a bicycle gang when they were younger, but it wasn't anything serious. Then, when McMahon was 22 and Kaufman was 18, illegal substances became the endemic in that part of Iowa. In Oskaloosa in the late 90s, people their age were either using, selling, or making illegal substances. McMahon and Kaufman were users, but without a source of income, money became a serious issue. In June of 1997, the pair came up with a plan to get money. They would rob a bank. But the day before their planned robbery, McMahon spotted a green pickup truck he decided he wanted. He was driving a gray station wagon he had borrowed from a friend, but wanted a vehicle of his own. The stepbrothers decided to follow the owner of the pickup truck home and steal it. The owner was a woman named Barbara Garber, a 52-year-old grandmother from What Cheer. The morning of June 11th, McMahon and Kaufman visited Barbara and gained entry into her home by saying they needed to use the phone. McMahon then made Kaufman take Barbara's life to prove himself. They took the pickup, but as McMahon had decided he wanted to keep the vehicle, they decided they needed another car for the robbery. This time, they went to a friend, Island Schultz. McMahon was the one to pull the trigger this time, taking Island's life before stealing her sedan. With the sedan, the men went to Gibson Bank. Wearing ski masks, the two men stole $65,000 before fleeing. It didn't take long for police to piece the three crimes together. Witnesses had placed the borrowed station wagon at Barbara's home the morning of the crime, and the pickup truck outside of Island's home. The weapon used in each crime was determined to be the same. A resident had seen McMahon driving the pickup truck, and when it was realized the boys were missing, police knew they had the right suspects. Still, it took weeks for McMahon and Kaufman to be caught. They had fled to Florida and were on a spending spree. Eventually, after 2 appearances on America's Most Wanted, a tip came in on June 30th that the vehicle was at a hotel in Pensacola. They had a third man with them, a hitchhiker they'd picked up, and police feared the man might be used as a hostage, but eventually the boys gave themselves up. Kaufman was first to confess to the crimes, but McMahon also pleaded guilty, and both received sentences that would ensure they spent the rest of their lives in prison. Number 4. Andrew Sue was a valedictorian and earned a scholarship to Providence College, where he studied economics and Japanese. He should have had a promising life ahead of him, but instead went down a dark path at the request of his sister. Sue's father passed away when they were young. A little over a year later, what looked like a robbery gone wrong resulted in their mother passing away too. 18-year-old Catherine Sue became the guardian of her brother, who was 5 years younger than her. Catherine had been dating a man named Robert O'Debane, who was 7 years older. Andrew grew close to Robert, and the couple became like a second set of parents to him. Andrew was the only benefactor of his mother's life insurance policy, but his sister and Robert used the money to set up their own bar while Andrew was at prep school. Andrew didn't seem to hold that against them though, and remained close to his sister. When he went to college, Catherine called him regularly. She told him Robert would attack her and steal her money, and she urged Andrew to grow up and be the man of the house. They'd been raised in a very traditional family, with loyalty to the family being highly prized. Catherine pressured her brother to do something about Robert and gave him the perfect plan for it. Catherine purchased a plane ticket for her brother and told him what to wear to commit the crime. She even told him where he could get a weapon in the attic of the garage of the home she shared with Robert. On the night of September 25th, 1993, Catherine was out with a lover. She and Robert had an open relationship, and this wasn't something that she was keeping from him. In fact, he was on the phone with another person he was seeing when Catherine called him to say that her car had broken down and asked him to pick her up. Robert went into the garage to get the car. Andrew came out of his hiding spot and attacked him. Neighbors heard the noise and called the police, but Andrew had already fled the scene in Robert's Jeep by then. Catherine tried to tell police Robert had gambling debts and blamed the crime on whoever he was in debt to, but police didn't buy the theory. She was eventually arrested, and Andrew was caught while on the way back to Chicago to bail her out. Andrew gave a full confession and insisted he committed the crime out of family honor. It was nothing to do with the life insurance that Catherine had for Robert. Both were handed lengthy sentences. While in prison, Andrew revealed another shocking secret. He feared his sister was actually responsible for his mother's passing. Catherine had told him her boyfriend was responsible, but when police investigated the couple, they each had alibis. The crime officially still remains unsolved. Number 3. Today, Ted Kimball and his younger brother Ronnie are in prison and will likely spend the rest of their lives there. The reason is due to a disturbing crime committed against Ted Kimball's own wife, for no other reason than money. One of the things that had attracted Patricia Blakely to Kimball was his ambitiousness. She thought he would be a good provider for the family he told her he wanted to have with her. He worked 2 jobs, including one at a building supply store he had taken over after the original owner had retired. To Patricia, this son of a Baptist church preacher seemed like her perfect match. Little did she know that Kimball had flipped between her and her cousin multiple times, and had only ended things with Patricia's cousin when she turned down a marriage proposal. In fact, it seemed the only reason Kimball wanted to marry was because the supply store owner only wanted to pass on his business to a married man with a good wife. Patricia and Kimball married a little over a year after they had started dating, and from the outside they seemed like a normal, happily married couple. But in private, Patricia had expressed concerns to her close friends. Kimball had forged her signature on a life insurance policy, and Patricia was worried he might take her life so he could get the money. Then there was the fire. On October 10th, 1995, Kimball was at work when he received a call from friends to say that Patricia hadn't arrived at her Bible studies class as planned. Kimball had tried to call the house but got no answer. Instead, he called his brother-in-law, Patricia's brother, to stop by to see if everything was okay. He went to their house to find it in flames. Patricia's body was found inside. It was determined Patricia had already passed away when the fire started, and it seemed like it had all been deliberate. Kimball had alibis. He'd been at work all day, so did the rest of Patricia's family, but Kimball's brother Ronnie had an alibi that was less solid. He was in the Marines and stationed at a nearby base, but had been on leave the day of the crime. He told police he had been at his brother's place of work for a few hours, then had driven home, but that left an hour unaccounted for. Police were also suspicious of Kimball. Not only did he not seem to be reacting the way a grieving person should, but he was also a suspect in a number of break-ins that targeted building supply stores. Then in January of 1997, police got the breakthrough they needed. Ronnie Kimball had confessed, though not to them. He and his wife had gone to visit friends when Ronnie blurted out that he had taken Patricia's life because his brother paid him to. The friend then went to the police. One of Ted Kimball's workers also came forward with information. He'd been involved in the burglaries, which were masterminded by Kimball. When the worker had begun to look like he might go to the police, Kimball had threatened to take his life, saying he had already gotten away with it for more than a year. In April, both of these scary individuals were arrested. Ronnie Kimball confessed. Ted Kimball also pleaded guilty eventually, but not before plotting to have key witnesses taken out. He also tried to retract his plea but was denied. Both will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Number 2. Joel and Michael Stovall were 24 years old when they committed a disturbing crime that led police on a 24-hour manhunt. The twins from Colorado had always been anti-law enforcement. When they were young, their father taught them how to make a universal handcuff lockpick. They were described as militant by those that knew them, and loners. They kept to themselves and were bullies in high school. It was September 28, 2001, when a neighbor called the police on the twins. According to the neighbor, the two scary men had taken the life of his dog and thrown it into the Arkansas River. Joel was arrested for the attack, but during the arrest, his brother had threatened the lone police officer, Deputy Jason Schwartz. Officer Schwartz was known as a conscientious officer who followed protocol, but for some reason this day he was a bit more lax. He put both brothers in the back of his car and didn't properly search Michael. Michael Stovall had one of the homemade lockpicks on him and 2 weapons. While they were being driven back to the station, Michael broke free of his restraints and attacked Schwartz. After a bullet hit Schwartz, the patrol car crashed into a ditch and the 2 criminals escaped. They pulled the police officer out of the car to attack him again and make sure that he was no longer alive before fleeing the scene of the crime. The Stovall brothers collected weapons from a cache that they had in a motorhome 5 miles away, then stole a vehicle. While they were in the process of stealing the truck, they were approached by another officer, Toby Bethel. It's believed Bethel hadn't even realized a crime was taking place when he was attacked and struck in the spine. After this, the brothers led police on a chase along the Arkansas River and into the mountains. They attacked any law enforcement vehicles that followed them, causing multiple injuries, but thankfully claiming no more lives. The chase led through the night. Before 24 hours after they were first arrested, they returned to the location they had abandoned the truck. Officers were waiting for them and they handed themselves in. Both pleaded guilty to taking the life of Jason Schwartz and attempting to take the lives of 18 others. These 2 disturbing individuals will thankfully spend the rest of their lives behind bars after this terrifying true crime story. Number 1. Pete and Pat Bondurant both had short fuses that led to the brutal passings of 4 people and landed both brothers in prison. They were both men who you didn't want to get on the wrong side of, as it might be the last thing you ever did. But even people who had done nothing to possibly wrong these scary siblings lost their lives at their hands. The 2 men were twins who grew up in Tennessee. Both were known for their large statures, weighing roughly 350 pounds each. They were also known from a young age for being eccentric and would often get into fights at school. Pete Bondurant was 20 years old when he committed his first serious crime. He was living in a house with 4 other individuals, 2 men and 2 women. One evening, when the women went to the shop, Bondurant attacked the 2 men. When the women returned home, he told them that they would be next. They managed to escape, but one of the men passed away due to his wounds. Bondurant was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but was granted parole after 5 and went back to his brother to continue his life of crime. The pair sold illegal substances from a farmhouse, where they amassed somewhat of a cult following. It wasn't long before another horrific crime was committed. In May of 1986, Gwen Duggar spent the night at the Bondurant home. The Bondurants were fixing her brother's car and she decided to hang out with them. They promised Gwen's brother they would bring her home later, but they never did. Instead, the Bondurants and 2 other men fed Gwen an unknown substance. When she couldn't defend herself, both brothers attacked her and then took her life. When Gwen was reported missing, the brothers were obvious suspects, but there was no body and no physical evidence that they had anything to do with Gwen's disappearance. The case went cold and the Bondurants were left free to continue their true crime story. The next victim was a man named Ronnie Gaines, who worked at the same rubber plant as Pat. Pat believed Ronnie had stolen his wallet. One evening, Pat went to Ronnie's to play cards and eat pizza, and accused the man again of stealing. Ronnie denied it, but Pat attacked him, taking his life with a wooden rocking chair. He called up his brother, and they both disposed of the body on the farmland owned by their parents. When police came questioning, Pat had an alibi. He had been with his girlfriend, Terry Lynn Clark. Weeks later, Terry would also pass away due to illegal substances. Even though law enforcement were certain that the brothers were behind all 3 crimes, they didn't have any evidence. The cases went cold for 3 years before a new officer reviewed the case. He found that Pat's estranged wife was now dating a police officer. In return for immunity, she gave the police all the information they had to put the 2 creepy siblings in prison. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.